Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course, that makes this episode 26 of Circles and Squares. And I personally just want to shout out Marvel Cinematic Studios for releasing me a beautiful birthday gift. Falcon and the Winter Soldier is out today. Thank you for honoring my birthday, Marvel. Really appreciate it. Best birthday gift I've probably received in a long time. So yeah, thank you to Marvel. I can't wait to watch the first episode of that after we record. It's gonna be, man. I don't know if you watched WandaVision. I don't think you did, but these shows are
I
kick ass.
haven't. It's on my list, but you know how slow I am at watching TV shows,
Yeah,
so
I know. Well, usually I am too. The only difference here is it's like tied to the MCU, right? Which is I don't know. It's
Mhm.
like a different qualification for a
and
TV show than a
and plus
regular one.
and plus knowing that they were preparing for your birthday, you kinda had to catch up, right?
Well, yeah, I feel obligated to go watch like the post-credit scene where Sebastian Stan looks right into the camera and says, "Happy birthday, James! Like, hope you have a great time." Like, I just really feel like I need to watch that. Like it wouldn't be
Right,
appropriate to leave it
right. It
out.
might it might be rude not to.
It would. I agree. But yeah, so I mean, there's that going on. But we have some games to talk about first, Kate. So maybe we should do that before we go and talk about Marvel. So usually our show is going to follow the same format it's going to be today, which is games we're playing to start off, including the PS Plus games from March 2021. After that, we'll talk about the news for the second part of the show. God, there's been a lot of news to talk about. It seems like we're always doing these like jam-packed news segments now. And then last part of the show, you actually found a pretty interesting survey, Kate, about like gamer motivations and like what exactly are the aspects of games that I guess draw us into them. So we both taken this survey and we'll chat about our answers for the third part of the show. And then of course we'll close out with a listener mail question, as we always do. But before we get into any of that, we got to talk about the games we've been playing. So Kate, let's talk about We Were Here. This is a game back from 2017. It's a smaller game we've kind of come across on PlayStation, I guess, and it's kind of a cool setup. It's like a co-op kind of escape the room kind of game where it's very much about communication, working together, solving puzzles, and we've actually played through it twice now, and I think we can agree we've had a really good time with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really interesting about this game is that there's 2 different roles you take on. One is the explorer, and I think the other one's called the librarian.
Yeah.
But taking on one of these roles, you start in a different area, you've got different, like, resources, to solve your puzzles, and you can't solve it on your own. You've gotta be communicating back and forth, so you'll have, like, one person might have a map that will lead the other person, where they're supposed to go, and one person, the next person's got, like, a symbol that gives a clue to the first person, so it's completely tied around, like, playing co-op and solving these puzzles together. Um, and it's really neat. It was a really charming and really cute experience, and it was interesting to go back and play it a second time, especially and see like what you saw the first time when you were giving me clues, and like, oh, I see now. It was kind of cryptic. I see why you were having some trouble with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not like an overly tough game. None of the puzzles are like really complex, but I guess the difficulty comes in like how well you're able to communicate with each other. And I think in general you and I did pretty good. I think the areas that kind of got us caught up were maybe a little bit, they're just like a bit trickier than the other ones. Like especially there's this one area where there's kind of a maze that the explorer has to work their way through, and the librarian has a map and kind of is giving them directions. But the map, as especially like coming to realize it the second time through, I played the explorer the first time and then I was librarian second. So that first playthrough where I was the explorer and you had the map definitely was the most challenging thing I think we had to do, just because we didn't realize the degree to which like the map was simplified compared to the maze. And so
Mhm.
like seeing that as we played through the second time last night and having that map to look at this time, I was like, wow, like no wonder we got so confused for a bit, because you're telling me to go left, but realistically I had like 3 different lefts I could have taken, but the map only shows me one. So it was yeah, it was really cool to see from both sides for sure. I think I personally preferred giving the clues a little bit, but I mean both roles were equally as fun, I would say.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I was kind of stewing on it, and I also think I preferred being a librarian a little bit. Like they both had a little bit of back and forth, but I think in general the librarian role was a little bit more of like you had more information and were providing clues, and the explorer was kind of like acting on them. So like librarian, yeah, had the map, the explorer would go through the maze. Librarian, like, the explorer would come across a couple symbols they needed, and the librarian would have like the whole list of symbols to like sort through and see which ones were useful. So there was a little bit of that, and I think I also agree I liked being the librarian a little bit more, which is kind of funny because when I was thinking back on it, and it kind of was putting it to to some other similar games. Like I was thinking of that board game, and I'm trying to think of the name of it now. Where like you've got it's either word or code words or code
Oh,
names.
code names, yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, like, kinda stuff like that, and I was like, usually I like to be the person guessing when it comes to any kind of board game or, like, even, like, Pictionary or something, like, I like to guess, but in this game in particular, I don't know if it was because of the video game format or what, but I did enjoy giving the clues a little bit more, but that's not to say that it wasn't fun also being the explorer.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, like I think the interesting part of a game like this is not even really it's not even really the subject matter. It's just it's the conversation between the both of us, like having to just solve these puzzles. So at the end of the day, like you're still having that conversation regardless of which end of it you're on, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I usually like using code names as the example. I usually prefer to give the clues. So I found like it kind of still, like I said, it was kind of my preference, but realistically, both fun
Mhm.
roles. The game itself is, I guess, we could talk about a little bit. Like, it's definitely not gonna blow you away visually. It's the kind of thing where if you're going through, I guess, like the PlayStation Store or whatever, you'd probably scroll past the thumbnail of it, or I guess like the image of it. It doesn't look overly like flashy, I guess, from like visually
Mhm.
or anything. Like, there's not really a lot of sound effects. There's not dialogue. Like, it's minimalist in that way, I guess. Like, it's definitely not a high budget type of thing, but the idea that they have for the game and like the way that it works is very interesting. And I mean, we're playing over PlayStation parties, but you can play online with a random person, and you actually have to pick up a walkie-talkie off the table and hold it up to your face, I guess, by holding a button when you actually want to talk if you're in the game. So there's even that extra level of immersion you could have, I guess, if we would have done it, I mean, through the walkie-talkies instead of the party. But it's I mean, I wish there was more games like this that existed, just something that's kind of co-op kind of puzzle thing where you're not actually having to really a lot of things are always based on combat or PvP and stuff, so it's just always refreshing to find some kind of puzzle based thing where you can actually work together like cooperatively and get through
Yeah,
like this kind of
I
challenge.
I agree, and I think the puzzle solving is, like, at its strongest release, it's my favorite when it's something that, especially for a co-op experience, you can't solve it on your own. Like, this isn't the kind of game where you sit down with someone and, like, you're both looking at the same puzzle, and then one person solves it and you move on, and it never turns into that kind of, like, one person's carrying the team or, like, one person, you're getting to, like
Well, you
there
can't.
there's no kind of conflict, like, it's nice that, like, you rely on each other to solve the puzzle, and each person has their own role and, like, is getting to experience the game, and I think that it's really well designed, like, I think this game, like, yeah, like you said, like, it's not the highest budget, it doesn't, have a lot of things that, like bigger games do have, but I don't think it necessarily needs them. Like, some quality of life things would come forward, like, it's a little finicky sometimes to, like, if you're trying to pull a switch, you have to be, like, the perfect distance from it and kind of, like, get your cursor on it correctly so that the button prompt goes through, but, like, those are such minimal things that are very clear, like, just there because it's a really small
Yeah,
game in comparison to what we're used to playing, and I think, like, it doesn't need anything else. I don't think it needs necessarily better graphics or, like, voice acting or anything, like, it was perfect for what it wanted to be, and I think it was really successful.
I totally agree with you, and it doesn't need those things at all. I guess it would just be like
Mhm.
if they happen to have enough success with this type of game, like maybe later iterations. I know there actually are some newer iterations. This is the original We Were Here. They have a few other different. I don't even know if they're expansions or I guess sequels would be the way to put it, and maybe those ones are maybe moving up in the polish level a little bit. Yeah, I hope that people play this and check it out. I'm glad we're talking about it on the show just to kind of raise even a little bit of awareness of it. If one or two people listening go and play it, at least that's getting a little bit of exposure out there, because games like this, I think we need to support them where we can so that we get more.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's creative, it's refreshing, it's different, and I highly recommend, pick it up. It's great to do, like, as a date night or, like, with a friend or even just, like, you could play, like, with your dad if you can't go see him
Oh
because of
God,
COVID and whatnot,
imagine
right?
playing this with dad.
Maybe not our dad, but maybe your dad would play
Yeah,
this.
love you, dad, but you got to learn to control the camera before you can play. Play this with us. Um, well, we've also been playing our PS Plus games for March, Kate. I think, unless you had anything else to say about We Were Here, but we've also played Maquette and Remnant from the Ashes. Now, we've both been playing Remnant, so maybe we should talk about that
Mhm.
first. This is, of course, I guess it's Souls-esque. kind of action adventure game. It's got guns is the big difference though, and focuses on kind of more ranged combat than Souls. But maybe you could speak about it better than me. But I've been really enjoying Remnant, and the best thing about it that we have to talk about, I think, is our different experience in terms of like you're playing as a single player experience, whereas I'm playing a 3-person co-op kind of run. So I think we've had some differences there in terms of the gameplay and whatnot. But I'm really enjoying this game for what it is right now. I don't think I would necessarily be falling in love with it if I was playing by myself, which is why I'm interested to hear what you say. But as a co-op experience and going through with some friends and just kind of killing guys and paying attention to the lore where we can and all that kind of stuff, I'm having a good time. It's been surprisingly fun for me.
Yeah, I think this game would benefit a lot from playing with a group, because I'm very torn on this game. 80% of the time when I'm playing, I'm having a wonderful time, and 20% of the time, I just wanna, like,
Speed past those other
chop I
parts.
just wanna chop my hands off. So, I think I described it to you the other day as, like, it's like a pineapple, but you have to peel it with your bare
Yeah,
hands.
yeah. What an
'Cause, like,
analogy.
the fruit inside is lovely and delicious and sweet, but it's so prickly to get through, so and what I mean by that is I like the combat. The combat is wonderful. It like you said, it's kind of I think the combat is really the only part of the game that gives it that Souls-like kind of
Hmm.
banner.
Hmm.
It's very, like, action responsive, like, you've gotta be on you're on your toes the whole time, the enemies are difficult, anything can kill you. You've got, your trusty dodge roll, which really feels good in this game.
Hmm.
It's a
It
big plus
does.
for
It
me.
does. And the
Um
UI is also very similar to Souls, I guess, too. Like with your items kind of on the left hand side with the D pad and like the bars. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
got a similar kind
yeah,
of
and
setup
there's
ish.
the items all have a little, like, some flavor text description on them as well. And, you build your loadout, so it's nice, and I think I like the melee and the ranged combat, so you get your loadout is like, yeah, you said 2 different guns and then a melee weapon. So I think we both picked the same character
Yeah, it's
coincidentally.
interesting we happen to get the same one. I'm really
Um,
enjoying the Scrapper so far, which is
yeah,
like
the scrap
the
is great.
close range kind of shotgun melee type of class. So
Yeah,
usually
so
not even what
everyone
I would play, but yeah, good choice
yeah,
so far.
exact same, not normally what I would play, but I figured it was the close range would be the best for playing alone, 'cause I had this horrible vision in my head of like, "Oh, I kinda like, normally be like the sniper in gun games, but like, oh, I'm by myself, like, I'm surrounded by 30 dudes.
Yeah, what do
I
you
have a
do?
sniper rifle," right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not great. So I'm glad I picked this one because the melee is super punchy, like, most of the regular enemies, I just chop down with my well, not chop, it's a hammer, so it's kind of awkward, but, like, I just mow them down with the hammer
Yeah, that
and then
starting
switch to my
hammer is
gun
like
for some of the yeah, like, I've just started recently, like, I played some last night, and I started not one-shotting things, and I went, "Uh-oh." But it's great, so, yeah, the guns feel nice too, um, and I love the combat, like, I can't stress how much fun I have when I'm in the dungeons fighting things,
it's a good time, right?
but
Especially with like the traits you can get. Like you can equip I don't even remember what they call them. They're like little bonuses you can put on each of your weapons, I guess. But they're
the
things like you
mods
can
are
the
neat.
mods, yeah, you can like have flaming ammo or put down a healing sphere on the ground. Or there's another one that I've got now, which is really beneficial for the close range class that we'd picked, which is like this spiked armor you can kind of put on your character for a short time, and it
Mm,
kind of as you take hits, you've got a chance to just reflect the damage back instead of taking it, and so that synergizes really
oh,
well with having the shotgun.
I
Um,
do love me some
yeah,
ambient
yeah,
damage.
yeah, and it's a
Um,
cool way to customize. Well, having like we might have the same weapon, but just adding these mods kind of changes how you would play certain situations, and you can equip
yes.
anyone to any weapon as well, which is kind of interesting. It's not like you have to have the flame ammo on the shotgun. You can put it on your pistol, which might have some more range. So it might be if you want to put something more close range specific on the shotgun, for example. So a lot of customization, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of those different things as you go too.
I hope so. I have noticed that, and this isn't kind of the 20% that I'm sort of not in love with, is I like all of the gear I have so far. Like I love the customization of the guns. I like so much the armor has like stacking upgrades. So, for example, if you wear the same, you can have like I think shoes, um, a like bait an armor set, and then like a body, and then a helmet, and they're different types. So if you have multiple of the same type, they increase with like a stacking bonus.
Oh, for having a full
So
set of armor, yeah.
for having a set that matches, which I really love because it gives you a little bit more of, like, customization options. So, like, okay, if you got an armor set that, stacks and is really nice together, but then you find a hat that's just objectively better, you don't have to, like, you make that decision now, like, "Do I break up my stack to have this better hat, or do I keep it and maybe I'll, like, see if I can find more with that hat set?" So, like, I like that a lot, and I've noticed as well too, like, you also have a couple trinkets, like, you can put on also kinda Souls, like, you can put on rings that give you
Hmm.
various, like, buffs or they slightly augment how you play, and I've noticed one of the rings said something, it was like, "It does this, but if you also have this other ring, it has this extra effect,"
Oh, really?
which
I
I
haven't
thought was
seen
really
anything like
cool. So,
that.
like, it does go that deep.
Cool.
Um, so I like that a lot. My only concern is I don't know if there's enough in it. Like,
Mm.
when you're exploring this game, and I don't know if maybe this is partially because of the way that you guys might hear a cat in the
I
background.
just heard her, yeah. Hi, kitty.
She likes Remnant. She's been playing with me, so she's got a lot of thoughts on the game as well. Um, but I feel like there needs to be more stuff in the world that you're finding. I found a lot of the exploration in this game is like you're rewarded for exploring by like, oh, maybe I found another like 3 iron to upgrade
Hmm.
my gun with. But like iron is what you get for killing enemies. So like
Yeah,
it
what's it?
isn't really like exciting or really that incentivizing to be exploring every nook and cranny. And I think when I think of a Souls-like game, which, maybe isn't fair to necessarily compare every game to Dark Souls and FromSoft, but, you can't help it when it's like they've sort of pioneered the genre. And I appreciate when Remnant and other games do different things, but just kind of in that comparison, like, I like to be rewarded and exploration's a big part of it, and I don't feel like exploring at least to the amount of I've played has really been that exciting or rewarding for me. Like, I almost feel like I just wanna hightail it to the dungeons and
Yeah,
just fight through those.
I agree with you. Well, I mean, when we started playing, we were definitely exploring like 100% of all the areas we were going through and making sure we
Mhm.
didn't miss anything. But it has really come to the point where it's like when you're exploring, all you really run into is either enemies, which are going to drop the basic resources for you, or you're going to just find the resources on the ground. There's occasionally some like notes to kind of build on the lore or whatever, but they're kind of few and far between from
Mhm.
what I've found as well. And it ends up basically the game is kind of weird. Like you're kind of in this you have this hub kind of world where the stores are and all the NPCs and all that. It's called the Ward, and you spend a lot of time there doing your upgrading and whatever. But then it kind of has this weird system. Like you don't just teleport from the Ward onto the level you're kind of playing. Like when you teleport out into the world, you go out from the Ward to the map. But then when you're on the map, it's almost like this big open environment where there's not a whole lot going on. You're kind of exploring. There's some enemies like we're talking about, and then from that map you then find entrances into little dungeons that you go into, which have the main kind of combat in it, and you spend most of your time kind of fighting in those dungeons. So it's almost this three-tiered type of map, but the middle area that you go to, I think the first area is called Fair Haven, right?
Yeah, Fairhaven.
Fair Haven,
Fairview, you're right,
whichever it
Fairview.
is. But there's almost nothing really there, and it's just such a big environment. I wish that part was almost a bit smaller, and then the dungeons could even be maybe expanded a little bit in terms of like what's the most interesting place to be at.
I agree, like, I would wanna spend and we should clarify too, because I didn't actually know this when I started playing, but the game has, like, roguelike elements where it's actually, a lot of the areas are especially the dungeons are randomly generated. So, each dungeon you go into is gonna be a slight different configuration, and they actually took this philosophy in an interesting way in that, like, they're even the bosses are randomized. So things that you fought in your game are different than what I fought, and, like, some of the upgrades that we're gonna get and, like, the items and rewards for the bosses are also gonna be different.
Yeah,
So, it's kind of a neat idea for a game like this where it incentivizes, like, a good replayability.
I think so. I think it does for sure. Especially like I didn't know that the bosses were actually in different orders as well. I thought it was more just the layouts of the dungeons. So
Yeah.
that's very interesting to me too, because we've beaten a couple bosses now, and whenever you defeat the bosses, you unlock usually like a trait. you can equip your character and start putting your skill points into to unlock like a new kind of ability for yourself, but you also unlock different weapons. So we're just talking about the hammer as the melee weapon, but one of the bosses that we've beaten gave us a different melee weapon, which I like more. And I'm thinking like, oh, you'll probably want to use this too when you get it. But now
Yeah.
it's like, are you even going to get this weapon that I
See,
have?
and that's interesting, whereas the boss I fought didn't give me either of those things. It gave me an item which I could turn into a new mod for one of my weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So which
Yeah,
was really cool, and I did it. And
yeah.
it's a really cool one, especially for playing on your own. It was I was really excited about it, but yeah, like, that's kinda neat, so it really does give it this sort of, like, water cooler, like, everyone's had a different experience with the game kinda feeling,
I'm
and
just
I
interested to see
like
as we
that.
play, like how diverse it ends up being. Like if you and I were to both go play for 10 hours straight, like how when we come together and talk about it, how many different experiences will we have had, or is it really just kind of the more we play, will we get to this point where it's like, oh, that was kind of just very similar once we reach a certain
Right, or,
point? Like
like,
I
we
just
fought the
wonder.
same stuff, we just did it in a different order.
Yeah, I just
And
wonder
and they
about that.
Yeah, I think the game is an interesting way of scaling as well because what it does, and I'm looking into this, and there's a lot of people have a lot of opinions about this online. And I was also interested to see because of how it scales with
Yum.
playing multiple people versus solo, because you don't have to start a campaign with multiple people. You can hop in and out of people's games at any time with the character that you've made.
Right.
And how it seems to work is it takes an average of each person's
Our level.
equipment score.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you don't really level in this game. Like you do get an EXP and you have traits where every now and again you gained a trait point and you can put it into something like, max health or stamina or like melee damage. So you do have level up points, but the main progression that you do is by upgrading your gear, so your weapons and your armor. And what it does is it takes the average level of that in each slot. So say your gun's like level +7 and your armor is like a +2 armor, and then your pants are like
Mm-hmm.
+3. It'll take those numbers and find the average of them, and then that's using that number, I think +1 to keep it, a little
Yeah,
bit still
tougher.
on the challenging side. That's what it will scale your dungeon to. So when you go into a dungeon for the first time and it generates, it will generate it to that difficulty level. And then when you're playing with multiple people, it just takes whoever is the highest.
Okay. So really we should be
Yeah.
playing on probably the same difficulty then, because we'll, even though I'm playing multiplayer, like the three of us have played all the levels together, so we're no one of us is farther ahead than the others in terms of our armor. So I
Yeah.
wonder how different our difficulty settings really are then too, because I know like just from speaking to you kind of off mic before we recorded, it seems that I'm having an easier time in a group of three than you are having single player.
I think so, and I did look at that as well. In addition to it, just like if one person's under level, they're gonna have a tough time versus, if you're both at the same level. But it also said, and on their wiki, and it was kind of vague, and it was like, "Oh, enemies have higher health if you have a group, and enemies do
Mm.
more damage if you have a group." So, like, it does also, like, account for if you have multiple people or not, but I don't know to, like, what
Yeah, what?
degree it changes things. But
Yeah,
in these games, always, like, having a group is always gonna make it easier because, like, you just have less things on you. This game
exactly.
I've noticed likes the philosophy of, we'll just throw 10 of the same enemy at you at the same time.
Yeah, they do it by numbers instead of difficult enemies, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
they
And
like to do swarm attacks. So for me, that's like, "All right, come on, everyone get in a line," and I swing the hammer versus, like, if you've multiple people, you don't have to fight 10 things at once. Sure, it might be a tougher 1 or 2 enemies, but you
it's
don't.
only one or two.
Yeah, it's only
Yeah.
1 or 2, and with this game, like, there's no blocking, it's just dodging, so having to dodge, 1 or 2 attacks is easier than, getting like, if you get swarmed, that's when you die. So I
Yeah.
think that's always good, and it also, like, is nice too with, like, you got your ranged personnel cover you, 'cause so far the difficulty's been nice playing on my own. Like, it's definitely not an easy game, but I haven't been incredibly, like, frustrated or stuck. I've died a few times for sure, but, it's always felt
Yeah,
appropriate
yeah.
level of difficulty.
It's a similar experience for us, really, too. There's a couple interesting things about playing it multiplayer, though. The first one is that friendly fire cannot be turned off. So we often find ourselves like accidentally shooting each other, or sometimes we purposely shoot each other and like mess around at the hub world and whatever. But it's kind of an interesting thing to have the friendly fire on, because not a lot of games, like I don't ever turn on friendly fire when I'm playing anything really. So being
Yeah.
forced to have it that way is added another layer of trying to be a bit careful, I guess, when we're taking our shots, especially for me too, because I'm the close range guy, right? So I'm usually up in near the
Yeah,
enemies, and so
you're the
the other
pincushion.
the other two guys are shooting their guns and whatever from distance, and I got to be careful
What
not to kind of get hit
and
and all
a
that.
nice detail about that as well, and I'm glad that you've told me that because the enemies also have friendly fire.
Oh, really? I
And
didn't
so
know
I
that.
I like that it's fair. Yeah, they don't it doesn't happen super often, but you'll notice sometimes, like, they won't, like, melee attack each other very often, but you'll notice sometimes, like, one of them will throw a projectile, but, like, it's behind another enemy, and it'll, like, hit him in the
Mm-hmm.
back, and he'll go like, "Oh." Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
The
so
only other thing I
I
wanted
like
to
that
shout
it's
out,
fair.
yeah, about the multiplayer specifically is, and probably my biggest downside to this game so far is, for the love of God, they need to make it more efficient in the hub world, because as a group of three, you can only talk to each NPC with one person at a time. So when we go to upgrade our skills or buy new equipment, or talk to the girl that changes, upgrades your healing item or whatever, like whoever it is, only one of us can talk to that person at a time. So after we go collect a bunch of loot, and it's like, oh, I can't wait to upgrade my equipment, we have to stand in this basically lineup and take a number and wait until each other have finished upgrading our weapons. And it just is so time consuming sometimes, because I mean, I don't want to get too into the upgrade system and all that, but it doesn't have that thing that a lot of modern games have, where you can kind of hover over the upgrade to your weapon and compare it to what you're currently wearing. Or if you're thinking about buying a new piece of armor, you can't really see it side by side with what you're currently wearing. So you're kind of in this limbo of, okay, check what this is, trying to remember the stats, back out of the weapon. Okay, no, go back to my inventory, compare my armor to it, go back to the store, kind of this kind of loop. And it's just one of those, like, it's very time consuming if you're by yourself. And then when you're also waiting with your couple friends that are also trying to talk to the same person, it just becomes like this horrible, like, NPC chatting dance that takes way too long. And it would just be so convenient to be able to do it at the same time.
Oh,
I don't
yes.
know why they would make it this way. So
That
please
that
fix it.
sounds that sounds so frustrating, and that is the 20% that I've kind of danced around of why I find it hard to get immersed in this game, because there's just some decisions like that where, like, yeah, like, you can't see comparison of items when you go to upgrade something, which is the main way like, improving your character. It's so frustrating, and I find the hub world too is really, like, unpleasant to navigate. It's kind of awkward, it's got a lot of different levels, and the map system in the game is really, really poor.
It doesn't really tell
Um
you like where your goal is either. Like you'll have this mission in the hub world saying, "Oh, go to the armory to upgrade your weapon for the first time," and it doesn't really
Mhm.
tell you where the armory is. You just kind of need to stumble upon it. And
Yeah,
and for us, it
there's
wasn't a big deal because there was three of us wandering around looking for these NPCs. But I would imagine by yourself, if you didn't
yeah,
happen to stumble into that little room, like you'd be
it
screwed.
genuinely took me a while to find stuff the first time I had to explore it, 'cause there's no markers on the map, and the map also doesn't, like, it's just I hate the map in general. It's like it shows you the map screen, but it doesn't let you move it at all. So you can't zoom and look around, you can't, like, zoom out to see something bigger, like, so sometimes you look at it and it's, like, way too small, and sometimes you look at it and you're like, "I can't even see where hardly see where my marker is because it's so big."
Yeah,
And so, like, those kind of things are just they're hard to get past sometimes, and the other problem is I really don't like how they've integrated your character into the game. And I think, like, this is a small thing, like, obviously the gameplay is more important, but it just it really takes me out that my character doesn't feel like it's properly interacting with the world in the terms of, like, how the character's written. So, like, for example, like, you go back to the hub world and characters will talk to you, but they just have, like, a couple lines of dialogue they just spout whenever your character is nearby. So, like, there's a character I've talked to multiple times and, like, I've bought items from him, and whenever I go anywhere near his room, he's like, "Oh, it's nice to see a new face around here."
yeah,
And it's
right.
like,
It's like, you
"Dude, like,
know me,
we know
dude.
each other." And, like, it's just so it's so awkward, like, I would rather that they don't say anything to you unless you talk to them than have lines that, like, don't work in every context, and your character does the same thing, like, I like the setting and the world a lot, like, it's a really, like, post-apocalyptic, like, destroyed,
Yeah, overgrown
oppressed,
kind of
overgrown, like,
world.
it's, like, dark, it's kind of, like, almost Fallout-esque, but with, like, more of, like, a
Like like
s
almost like a paranormal type of vibe to it,
yeah,
or
it's
like
almost
something
got, like, kind of, like, a
evil.
Lovecraftian kind of, like, horror feel to it, like, there's something, like, unknown brewing under the surface, and my character is, like, exploring that. I'm by myself, I'm set up, I'm, like, probably terrified, but, like, "Okay, I've got a goal, I've gotta beat these monsters," and I'll be fighting, and at least, like, 3 or 4 times in the middle of fighting, like, a couple enemies, my character will just scream, like, "Woo, I did it!" Like,
Yeah.
it's like, "Alright, I guess you gotta pump yourself up," but it just feels so, like, inappropriate and awkward based on, like, the
What's actually
situation.
happening? Yeah.
And I just feel like it's so, like, not cohesive how they've put these systems and these characters in this world, and, like, I just I wish I could just tweak a few things because I enjoy playing it, but, like, the idea of, like, having to go do my inventory management or every now and again when my character says something annoying, it just sucks me right out of the game.
Mm, mhm.
And I wish going forward, I think, like, they've designed a really solid and fun gameplay system, but I think I would love to see them going forward if there's a Remnant 2 or make another game in the future, like, to really, really consider all the smaller details about how it would feel to be in that character's shoes, or if someone's talking to you, how they would react to you, and that kind of a little bit more of, like, a role-playing system involved,
Yeah, I
because I
think
I think it makes such a difference, especially when you play a game like this that's supposed to be very, like, atmospheric and, like, character building.
yeah, I'm totally with you too. Like, I think we've had a bit of a different experience in the multiplayer type of setting, but I know one of us is playing a character that every time she kills someone or something's going on, she's like, "Yeah, like I love killing, like yeah, woo!" Like this cheering thing, and it's like it's so out of place, you know. Like in that situation, just like that wouldn't be probably how someone would react. You're right, but I think the best way to sum it up is what you said to me last night, which was like it seems like they put a lot of effort into the combat, did a really good job designing the combat, and then kind of just they had to find a way to surround it with some kind of game to make around the combat, which didn't seem to have the same care put into it as the actual fighting and like moment to moment
Mhm.
kind of like interactions in terms of like when you're shooting people compared to everything else. So yeah. I mean, like you said, it's a good game. I think it's got a lot of flaws, but if you're interested in something, in this vein, or you're looking for something like, hey, I like Dark Souls, I like Sekiro, whatever, but I'm looking for something kind of
But
adjacent instead of
Dark Souls
exactly
was
the same.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, "Dark Souls was cool, but what if it had
What
guns?"
if they had
Like,
guns?
and, like, it is good. I
It
recommend
is.
this game, but yeah, it's not gonna be my, like it's not gonna make my top 25 list.
No,
I
no, no.
think, next time we do that again.
Right. Well, that's Remnant, I guess. Check it out. I have been playing one other game, which I will talk about now, which is the other PS Plus game, Maquette, which I was a nice little short puzzle experience I had. Beat it over a couple days, and I'm blown away by this. I got to tell you, like, I strongly recommend you go back and try Maquette, especially since it's the kind of thing you can probably beat in it would be a long afternoon, but you could beat it in one afternoon if you wanted. So
Mhm,
this is the puzzle game that came out. I believe it's published by Annapurna, but it is the one. It's kind of like where you're playing with perspectives. So you those like Russian stacking dolls that all go within each other and they're different
mhm.
sizes. It's that kind of idea. So you're manipulating the size of different buildings or objects, and kind of you'll find a little tiny bridge, and you'll put it in this diorama of the place where you're in, and then when you look over to the full size version, the bridge will be there in full size, and now you can walk across it. So it's those kind of puzzles, and they become a little bit mind bending the further you get into the game, because you begin to manipulate the size of a lot of things at once, and even your character kind of can become bigger or smaller depending kind of when you move to different areas. I don't want to spoil like the story, because there is a lot of story going on as well, and it's actually really heartfelt, which is something that surprised me, being more than just the puzzles. There's also this kind of narrative on in terms of like this couple's relationship, and the puzzles are kind of symbolic of items in their lives or things that have happened to them in that way. So it was very interesting, and like I would say that the puzzles in general are very fair, and you can get through the game pretty easily. There was a couple of puzzles where I felt like, oh, I would never have figured that out, so I did look them up just because I wanted to get to the end of the story to see what happened. Um,
Mhm.
But if you're willing to look maybe a couple puzzles up to kind of keep that momentum going, and you're willing to do that, it's a really cool experience. And also, I gotta say, the soundtrack is really, really surprisingly good. It's very similar to the soundtrack in The Last of Us 2, which is something I didn't think I would ever say. But it's kind of this folk music. You know that it's very acoustic guitar with The Last of Us,
Right. Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So it's sort of like that, and the same kind of tone and emotion in terms of the music. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place, I guess, explaining this game, but if you kind of look at the videos, you'll get an idea of what it is. I would say it's one of the strongest PS Plus games. I think it's definitely the best one I've played in a long time.
Wow.
So
That's impressive. Yeah,
yeah,
the game looked really good. I meant to try it out, but I just didn't. I unfortunately didn't have time to slot it in. But it's definitely something that's installed on my PlayStation and is eventually we're
yeah,
gonna have to
I,
shout it out again.
I strongly recommend it because it's very, very good. And like I said, the story was very hit home very hard. I didn't expect it to have such a down to earth narrative.
I thought you were gonna say I didn't expect to cry.
Yeah, man, you could cry. I would
You
not blame
could.
someone if they said they cried during playing this game, because it's along the same lines as like a brother's tale of two sons type of
Right.
narrative in terms of
Like
like
a
how
very
it
like
would
a very
impact you.
personal
Very
and kind
personal
of like
story.
intimate story.
Yeah, it's the story of like this girl and this guy she meets, and they kind of go through this relationship, and their relationship has these kind of twists and turns, you know. But what's so relatable about it is that despite the game being obviously very much like unrealistic, the story is like you could easily have experienced a relationship just like the one they're describing, or know someone that's been in that same situation. And the voice actors they have to portray the characters, they just seem like regular people. Like they could have gone to a Starbucks and recorded like two random people just sitting there and got them to read these voice lines. Like not that it's bad or unprofessional, because it's very professionally done, but it just has this
It's
organic
so
nature to the
natural.
performance. Yeah, like you don't feel like you're listening to recorded narrative lines in the same way as it
Right.
could be someone's diary entry they're reading to you.
Right.
Um,
It's just like sitting and listening to this podcast. It's so natural.
it's so natural. It's so natural.
So
Um,
natural.
but yeah,
Um,
that's Maquette.
that's awesome.
That
Well,
I've
we've
got
had
to say
some
about it.
we've been blessed. I mean, I know Marvel's shouting at your birthday, and that's lovely as well. But also, your birthday month has been very blessed with some wonderful PS Plus games.
Well, it's true, and we haven't even talked about Final Fantasy VII Remake, because obviously we spoke about that on a previous episode when I played it
Mhm.
originally. So like that's part of PS Plus. It's just crazy. The other thing I wanted to mention just very quick right now is I did complete Control. And just because I
Ah.
talked about it a couple episodes ago, I wanted to go back and just say that I think I don't know how I came across on Control the first time we recorded, but I think I was kind of in the boat of like, it's a really good game, not quite up to the expectation of what I thought based on like
Mhm.
what the industry was saying about it. But I do want to just shout out and come back to it, because now that I've completed it, I think I'm higher on it than I was when we spoke about it on the show, just
Right.
because I think
Just a
it really
really
ramps
strong
up.
finish.
It ramps up at the end, and the way the story concludes, and like the storyline that happens towards the end of the game really not saves it for me, because I liked it before, but it kind of adds that extra little bit of like, wow, that really was interesting kind of at the end. And also, I just need to shout out the ashtray maze, because that is one of my favorite sequences I've played in a game in a long time. Very cool. So definitely check that out. But yeah, I guess that'll end us for what we've been playing for this week. So stick with us after the break, where we will talk about the news. All right, everyone, welcome back to the second part of the show, where we have another huge news day, which apparently is every episode now. Welcome to 2021. But our first story is that, hey, there's a new PlayStation IP in development with Jade Raymond, who, for those of you who don't know, I guess she's an industry veteran, one of the people that was kind of the founder of the Assassin's Creed franchise. She was recently working with Google Stadia, which was interesting because they kind of announced this whole like, hey, we're making first-party Stadia games. Hey, Jade Raymond's here. You guys know her. She's like well-known industry person. And then, hey, we're shutting down our first-party studios at Stadia. So nothing ever came of that whole era. But I guess now Jade has started her own studio called Haven, and they're working on an unannounced IP for PlayStation. So just to clarify, this is not a PlayStation studio that she's created. It's an independent studio which has been, I guess, contracted by PlayStation, similar to Kojima with Death Stranding. So exciting news nonetheless, and especially like seeing someone of this kind of ilk and status in the industry come and be working for a brand new PlayStation IP. I think it's pretty cool. I don't really know what to expect, and I'm sure we won't see this game for probably 2 or 3 years at least. But it's cool nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I don't know. It's kind of neat news, and yeah, it's probably gonna be a while till we hear anything. But I mean, more games the merrier. So
It's always just cool to see stuff get added, I guess, to PlayStation's thing, especially with all this Xbox stuff going on. Like, it's nice to see PlayStation be like, "Hey, we're starting a new studio." Kind of, well, we're not starting a new studio, but we have another kind of studio working towards something exclusive for us with all this
yeah,
Xbox stuff going on
I
with
I will say though,
Bethesda.
like it's kind of bittersweet. Like I get it, and like it's exciting, and like PlayStation exclusives are usually a very high like caliber, even though this isn't, like you said, a PlayStation studio specifically, but like, normally they come with like a good deal of like assumption and assuming that it's going to be quality, but like at the same time, I don't like how divided things are. Like I would be fine with everything just coming out on every system, and like I know like there's an argument like it's good
That
to have
competition or
that
whatever, I guess. Yeah,
competition and it pushes things forward, and so like fine, that's an angle as well, but, like, I just feel like it's such a shame for people to be cut off from experiences, so, on one
yeah,
hand, I guess it's good for PlayStation, on the other hand, it's like, well, but, like, what if someone else wants to play it? I feel sorry for them. Like, and
I
I
guess
just
that's
feel
a good
like,
point. Yeah,
like, I don't like that divide of, like, "Oh, Xbox is better," like, "Oh, PlayStation's better," and, like I mean,
yeah,
obviously, if I had
yeah.
to pick one, I'd pick PlayStation, it's pretty clear, but at the same time, it's just, "No, why don't we all just I just want everyone to have a good time."
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think everyone should have a good time too, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
guess until the industry starts working that way, I guess we'll have to count our exclusives on this side and that side, whatever. But you're
Mhm.
right. You're right.
Yeah, it's
Speaking
like,
of exclusives, we also have a story coming up number two, which is that the PSVR 2 controller has been revealed, which is interesting because last time we were talking on the show, it was like, hey, there's this weird patent where they're gonna have banana controllers for the PlayStation and all this stuff, and now it's kind of like, hey,
I
no, here's the real
I
controller.
am I am disappointed. It is, spoilers, not a banana,
It's not, but
nor is it any fruit at all.
it's not, but it is interesting looking. Like it's God, how do you even describe this? It's
They
like,
look like like a fencing sword.
oh yeah,
It
with
looks
that
kinda
armor
like
on your hand, yeah,
yeah, it looks kinda like that. It's got, like, they call it, like, the orb part that, like, sort of, like is you hold the controller and then it, like, kinda goes around your hand,
yeah,
like, your hand's, like, inside the circular bit.
yeah.
That's the professional way of I'm sure that's professional words they've used is the circular bit.
I'm sure it is, yeah. I'm sure it is, but it seems like a cool controller anyway. I know it's got all the same kind of haptic feedback, adaptive triggers, all this stuff on it that is kind of standard in the dual sense, and it's also got some VR tracking, I guess, because it's got to go with the headset, and I think it also has a lot of areas where the controller, even if it's not on a button, it can track your finger placement and some gestures and whatnot. So you might not even be playing a lot necessarily with the buttons on some games, and it might just be like little swiping gestures on different parts of the controller. So I guess it kind of just depends how it's going to get integrated. But as far as just the controller itself, like I think it looks pretty futuristic. It kind of has a similar design to the headset, the what's it called, the Pulse headset or whatever that I've got. Like it kind of has the
Mhm.
same kind of shape on some of the design. I can see how it kind of look, at home next to that device, um, with the PlayStation and everything. So, I mean, long ways away still, I guess, but just kind of cool to get this announcement. I wonder if it had anything to do with any kind of leak, and they're just like, you know what, we'll show it these people now, just so there's less speculation and we can kind of,
Yeah, it's
control the message.
interesting. And, like, I don't like, we've talked about VR in the past, and I don't know if it's still something I'm at the point of adopting yet, but I will say that, like, this one does interest me because of how blown away I was by the DualSense controller.
Hmm.
Like, they spoke about it, and I totally understand if people, like, it's hyped up, it can't it's not as amazing as people say, and I totally get the skepticism because I was kind of in that boat, was like reserved, like, well, we'll see how it actually ends up,
Hmm.
panning
Hmm.
out. But I'm so blown away with how good it feels and how much it actually like changes my experience when I'm playing, that it gives me a lot of confidence that the rumble and like the feeling of playing, especially in like such an immersive VR setting, would be really neat to pick one of these up.
Yeah, I think VR actually might be the place where these haptics and the rumble and everything shines the most because it's that extra
Mhm.
level of immersion, right? And I mean, I get it playing all types of games now too. Like, it's not something I brought up, but even with Maquette, like you pick up a wooden box and hit, and it hits against something metal, and you can kind of feel the way that wood would feel hitting against metal in your hands as you're playing on the dual sense. So just having that in
Mhm.
VR, I think, would be an extra level of like, wow, this is really cool, and something that the PlayStation would also have over top of the more powerful VR headsets, kind of like Valve Index and those on the computer. Like those might be more powerful in terms of the graphic fidelity, but I mean, having the HD rumble and everything on the PlayStation is another counterpoint to something, I guess, in PlayStation's like win column in terms of
Mhm.
VR offering. And I
Well,
guess we also don't know how powerful PSVR 2 is.
yeah, and also, like, leading into our next story, they have, like, such a strong lineup of VR games as well at this point.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, let's talk about the third story, which is that PlayStation's Play at Home initiative is continuing into 2021 a bit further. We have announcements that starting March 25th, we're getting a lot of games coming out on Play at Home. I think originally they were doing one or two games kind of here and there, but we have Abzu, Enter the Gungeon, Res Infinite, Subnautica, The Witness, all coming to the Play at Home initiative. And then we also have a bunch of VR games, including Astrobot Rescue Mission, Moss, which are both humongous games, like Astro and Moss. Wow.
Mhm.
Thumper, and then Paper Beast, which is that paper mache kind of game we
Oh,
saw
that
on
game
one of
looks
the.
so gorgeous.
Yeah, it was on one of the showcases they did, I think, last year. So a great lineup for sure, especially like, yeah, PSVR. If you had a PSVR, you could literally buy one right now and get four, like at least like Moss and PSVR, or Moss and Astrobot for sure are like must plays if you had a PSVR, as far as I know.
Yeah, and with PS Plus, they've been putting out a PSVR offering pretty frequently as well, so, like, yeah, you genuinely could buy it, and, like, I mean, you'd obviously wanna pick up Beat Saber because it's the best VR
Of
game ever
course,
made,
of course.
but aside from that, like, your catalog is basically full.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely. Are you gonna play any of these? Do you think, or play at home? Anything
um
screaming at you? Or
we'll see, like, I kinda wanna play Abzu just because, it's been compared to Journey,
yeah.
a decent amount, and I'm a huge fan of that style of game, or the more, like, experience kinda things. The other ones I've played Under the Gungeon, I think that's fantastic. I would like to go back and finish The Witness. I played it quite a few years back, when it was new, and I never was able to finish. I was playing on this dinky laptop at the time, and it had a bug with the graphics card that was in my laptop, and after doing some research, I found out that, like, people who had this graphics card, like, it wasn't that it wasn't strong enough to run it, but it was just some sort of weird, like, integration issue, and it would just, like, crash.
That
So I
sucks.
got maybe, like, 2 hours into the game and then just all of a sudden started having these crashing issues, and I've never gone back and played it since I've upgraded my setup, and I'm sure at this point I'm hoping at this point that they've, fixed that issue as well.
Yeah.
But I've always meant to, like, it is such an incredible game, and I think it's one of those things where it's gonna be a bit polarizing. It's gonna appeal to some people and some people won't be interested, but it's a puzzle game, but the idea is that it teaches you based on you looking around and observing your surroundings. So the game has like multiple different types of puzzles and it never once tells you what you're supposed to do or gives you any kind of hints. It's really just like you have to look at it and try to like understand, and it has such an interesting approach to teaching.
I remember I
And I think
checked.
it's just like, oh my god, like, this is the kinda game that, like, you could write, like, your like, thesis
Yeah.
on if you're, like, studying something adjacent, like, it's such an impressive game, I really wanna replay it.
Yeah, I remember checking it out. I think it was on PS Plus a while back already,
Mhm.
and that's a few of these games as well. But The Witness, I remember I actually downloaded it and played for like 20 minutes or so, and I got to this puzzle, and I just kind of thought to myself, like, this game is cool. I am not. This is not what I'm in the mood for right now, but it's something I definitely wanted to check out also. So I might join you in that. And then I'm also kind of interested to check out Res Infinite, just because I think it was. I think, going back to it, it was on that the greatest PlayStation exclusive bracket that we did back
Mhm, I
what,
think
10
it
episodes
was.
ago or so. So just for that reason, I'd like to check out Res Infinite. And then yeah, Abzu I've played and beaten, really enjoyed it. And Gungeon, yeah, I played a bunch, but great offerings all in all. I'd love to play Astrobot Rescue
Mhm.
Mission, obviously, once I get PSVR.
Obviously.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
One of us is gonna have to. We gotta support our boy.
at this point, yes. Kate, let's move to our last news story, though, shall we? Which is that
Mm.
out of nowhere, seemingly, I don't know if this has been like rumored or people have kind of thought about this. I mean, it's not something that I follow really closely at all. But PlayStation has bought Evo, which is wow, who saw that coming, right? I guess it's like more of a sponsorship thing where it'd be like, hey, Evo's back. You know, we had this horrible kind of there was like that sexual abuse allegation thing going on
There's
last
been
year,
a
and the
lot.
whole thing got removed. And
Yeah, I don't follow Evo extremely closely. I kind of do keep an eye on it, and I've definitely watched some Evo in the past.
yeah, I watch Evo
I
when it's
wouldn't.
on sometimes. Like some of the events are cool, but I
Yeah.
don't really follow the kind of the how Evo functions or like the background
Yeah,
of
exactly. I
the
wouldn't say I've
of
got
it
an
or anything.
extremely intimate knowledge of it, but I do, like, keep an eye on it from time to time, and they've had a lot of controversy lately, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was kind of tied to it, like, give them a little bit of, like, a breath of life, having Sony backing them.
Yeah, I think
But
it could be like
I
one of those things where it's like, hey, the people running this, there was some weird accusations, sexual abuse allegations and all that. So why don't we just, Sony buys us, they can kind of run it in a way or like oversee it in a way where they could maybe vet some of these things and the controversy can kind of be like, hey, these people aren't running it anymore. We're with Sony now, like you can trust us again,
Yeah,
kind of deal.
exactly, and I feel like Sony's kind of like, they're gonna be involved, but sort of a little bit more of a back seat. Like, I don't know how much is actually gonna change about going to EVO and, like, participating.
Yeah,
Hopefully, this
yeah.
maybe just, like, makes it a little bit more, like, professional and kind of, helps them to mitigate some of the issues that they were having. Um, but otherwise, the only other connection I think is kind of funny is they run everything on PlayStations at EVO. So that was the other connection I thought was interesting Sony has, because like, obviously, they need a lot of setups when you go to these tournaments. People, like, they bring their fight sticks and all their own controllers and whatnot, but all of the actual setups they have are always run on PlayStation.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a
So,
good
I
branding
don't.
opportunity, right? Because now they can even brand it even
Yeah.
more. Like people already knew they were playing on PlayStations, but now they can have like now so, like official PlayStation game tournament. Like they could really
Yeah.
market it even more strongly now, which is
Yeah,
I guess good
exactly.
for
So
them.
it was kind of a surprising weird news story, and then I remembered that detail, and I thought like, "Oh, okay, well, they kind of at least were, like, holding hands with Evo for to some degree." So,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's kinda cool, and I like the idea that, like, that means Evo's gonna be on this year, so I can watch some
Yeah, I think
Smash and
it's
some
pretty
of the
much
other games.
confirmed, right? Yeah, I know Nintendo actually commented. They don't Nintendo doesn't usually get too vocal about things with other companies, I don't think either, but I know they even had a bit of an interaction with Sony about Evo. I guess obviously because Smash is one of the biggest games at the tournament. So I don't know if this will spark some kind of like relationship between Sony and Nintendo in some way. We can always dream, I guess, but I'm sure it'll be if Evo's on, I can't imagine a world where Smash is
Hey,
not there.
I mean, they're gonna be there, and who knows? We got 2 more slots on our fighters pack. Maybe Kratos is gonna make his way over.
Oh, could you imagine? The even more exciting thing, Kate. What happens if because Sony now has their own fighting tournament? What if they actually make PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale 2 and
Oh my
they use
god.
our character list that we created?
I didn't
Uh,
even think about that. We gotta email it over. Like, "Guys,
we should,
I
guys.
know
We
you're
already
watching.
we already
Yeah, we
made the
figured
roster for you.
it out. You can save yourself so much time and money. We've done it."
Okay, well, you know what, Kate? Why don't you start drafting up that email? We'll take a quick break and send it over to Evo, and then we'll be right back after the break to talk about our game interest survey. I don't even know what to call this thing. It's a survey on, I guess, what draws people to play games.
Gamer motivation, I
Gamer
think. Actually,
motivation.
yeah, gamer
Yeah,
motivation profile. That's what it's
there you go.
called.
We'll be back to talk about our gamer motivation profiles right after this. All right, everyone, welcome back to the third and final part of the show where I think I'm just going to let Kate intro what we're doing here because it was you that found this and kind of came across the little quiz we're going to be talking about. So take it away.
Yeah, so I found this was really interesting, and I've done it obviously myself, and I've sent it to a few people, and we found that at least most people I've talked to think that it's like really accurate. And I think it's interesting the kind of psychology behind what draws us to different gaming experiences. And so this is a study done by Quantic Foundry, and they did a bunch of study on different people, like what kind of games they like to play and what sort of experiences they're looking for. And they've kind of narrowed it down to 9 sort of profiles that everyone kind of fits into to a certain degree. And it kind of explains like what sort of like what kind of motivates you or drives you to pick certain games over other games. So we'll link it in
Yeah,
the
I'll put
yeah,
it in
all
the
the
show notes for
info.
sure and everything.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I think I encourage you guys to go try it out, even just for a little bit of fun. Everyone likes taking a quiz. There's something weirdly, like, appealing about, like, taking a
true.
quiz,
Like,
and, like,
which kind of
even
toast are you?
yeah, exactly, like, it's always dumb as shit, but it's like, "Oh, man, like, what kinda toast am I? I'm Marmite toast, maybe?" So, it's
Hell
good,
yeah.
but the 9 types, just as a quick overview, what they've settled it down to as a summary is there's the acrobat who likes, challenge and discovery, the gardener who likes quiet, relaxing task completion, the slayer who wants cinematic mayhem but with a purpose, so story, destruction, the skirmisher whose quote is kind of jumping into the fray of battle, which is a combination of like destruction and completion. The gladiator, which was kind of funny, is described as like a hardcore gaming. So it's like challenge, completion. There's the ninja, who is a speed and skill, so completion challenge. The bounty hunter, who likes world exploration, fantasy. The architect, who is strategy. And then the bard, who wants to play a grand story of community and fantasy. So
A lot of
um,
variety there,
a lot
I
of
feel.
variety, and obviously no one, you fit into multiple ones potentially. The quiz will give you like a main type and then a secondary. So for me, it gave me the gladiator is a main one, and then the bard is a secondary. So I'll just read out what it says here. It says gladiators are competitive gamers who like to identify as hardcore. And I read that at first, and I was like, oh, okay, like this seems a little like
Yeah.
seems a little like I kind of don't know how I feel about this. But then it goes on to explain they want games to engage them in a broad spectrum of features, and they're looking for an epic skill based experience. So I think like it kind of said, like, hardcore, it sounds, like, dumb, like, in the way that, like, almost, like, kinda gatekeepy, but I think they meant
Yeah.
hardcore in the way that, like, really immersive and, like, you wanna, like, invest a lot in your games more so than, like, "Oh, get good, I'm better than you," so I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
how they
yeah.
meant it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Um, and then the bards are team players who wanna chat and interact with other players in worlds that are rich with lore, stories, discovery, and customization. For them, the game is a grand story which I think is actually a pretty good for me specifically. Like I like a lot of obviously like combat and like immersive experiences, but I also really care about the lore and the world building and characters. So
Mhm. Mhm.
um they go on to it, then it breaks it down really nicely for you. So it gives you
Well,
like
hold
your
on a sec.
different
Let me read mine first actually too, because I think it'll make
oh
sense to
okay.
do it this way too.
Okay, sure.
So
Yeah, that's a
so
good
just to
idea.
yeah, just because I also the my main one that they gave me actually was the bard. So
Okay.
the it's interesting, but maybe we'll talk about my feelings on it after. But my main one was the bard, which was about that grand story and the emerging from a community
Mhm.
of players and the lore and everything. So I guess that kind of aligns to me in some way, but I also feel like it wasn't totally accurate. Like my secondary one is the Slayer, which is the heroic protagonist with a cinematic story. They're solo gamers who enjoy highly created narratives, slower paced gameplay, seems highly interactive action movies want to be experienced. So I feel like that one actually kind of lines up with me just because it is like a cinematic story. I really enjoy like stuff like God of War and Uncharted and all those kind of things. Like
Mhm.
the Sony first party I feel really falls into like the Slayer demographic
Yes,
in a lot of ways. So I
100%.
can totally agree with that. But the Bard one, I felt like, oh, maybe this
I
isn't
think
exactly me.
I
Um,
think the Bard one also because you play a lot of games, like, online with people, and so I think that
yeah,
Bard goes into, like, like, you don't necessarily think of, like, Apex Legends as a Bard game because it's not really, like, story rich, but it's interacting with other people, right?
no,
And, like,
it's true, it's
that
true.
community aspect, so I think
I,
that's maybe where you Bard a little bit more.
yeah, and that's kind of how I interpreted it too. But just like from my own perspective, I felt like I don't know, like I've been playing a lot of those games, like Apex specifically recently just because of the pandemic and stuff. But if I were to just in a vacuum say like, hey, what are my favorite types of games? Like multiplayer stuff wouldn't really even be in my top 3 or 4 games really. So I
Hmm.
found that a little bit interesting, especially since like the community, but like the community aspect, because I'm not very really one to go on like forums and talk about games with people or randomly. But then I thought about it. I'm like, well, we do the podcast, and that's like a so
Yeah, that is totally Barty. And the other
so
thing too is a lot of those like Sony first party go back to that like they're Slayer, but they're also kind of Bard games too in the
yeah.
sense that like they're really world heavy and like God of War is like, you know, that's such an intimate story you're following along with and like
Hmm.
Persona is so focused on the characters and the story and the lore and like
Yeah.
it's
It's
kind of
it's
like
definitely accurate in that
integrates
way.
so much. So
Hmm.
but it's interesting. It does kind of like break it down a little bit more. So it kind of goes into the components that drive you and the reason that they assigned you those categories. So we kind of go through them. I think it's kind of interesting.
Hmm.
I want to
Hmm.
see what you got.
It is.
So
Yeah, I'm interested to see.
um, the first one is action. So this is um,
So
split
these,
into two
yeah,
categories of excitement and destruction. So
yeah.
destruction is kind of like, you know, chaos and blowing things up and mayhem. And then excitement is fast-paced, intense adrenaline rushes, being surprised by like thrills and reaction time kind of gameplay. So for me, I got an 86% on excitement,
Yeah.
but I got a 3% on destruction.
So I was 76% excitement and 32% destruction, which was
That's
like,
funny.
and the thing is, the destruction is like they gravitate towards titles like Call of Duty and Battlefield. Like I don't ever play either of those games, but I guess it's kind of Apexy in a way too.
Yeah,
So
well,
that makes
to me,
sense.
this kinda made me think of, like, you know, that person who's like, "I'm gonna be, like, the grenade guy, and, like, I wanna, play, like, this almost made me think of more kind of like GTA, like, I'm gonna, like, go to and, like, Just Cause, and I'm, like, gonna
Hmm.
destroy
Hmm.
stuff, and, like, to me, like, that doesn't appeal to me at all, so getting such a low score, like, felt really good, and the excitement, obviously, like, that is
Yeah.
that is what interests
Yeah.
me, so
Yeah, it's
that's
interesting. Like the
funny.
destruction is listed like 32%, but I don't know. That seems high for me. The excitement also, like some of the references they show in here are funny. Like for excitement,
Yeah,
76%. Like, well, this style of gameplay can be found in first-person shooters like Halo. It can also be found in games like Street Fighter. But how do you quantify excitement? Like to me,
yeah.
you can have excitement in like Danganronpa, which is a
Yeah, exactly. I
visual
found,
novel.
like, some of their examples weren't necessarily, like, the best, or at least their examples, like, it's a lot more broad than, like, the 2 or 3 examples they give you, so I think,
Hmm.
like, that
Hmm.
was maybe the kinda, like, the least interesting part of it, but just actually reading the descriptions does, seem
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
good, and I think, like,
yeah,
also too, like, to quantify this kind of a thing is so hard. I think they've done a good job of just at least narrowing it down and giving you kind of, like, general idea
yeah,
of
yeah. I
of
agree.
different avenues, like, it's impossible to say certainly, but, anyway, we'll go on to the next one. The next one is social component, and it's split into competition, which is, you know, getting a high score, competing, and team or PvP or team versus team, or getting like getting a high rank on a solo player game.
Hmm.
And then there's community is the other one, which is socializing, collaborating with people, either playing, um, something co-op or even just like participating on a forum or talking to people about a game.
Or like party games are in
Um,
there as well, I think.
yeah, party games are in there as well. So I got a 39 on percent on competition, which I think is good because I like competing. Like we play a lot of HOTS is the game
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought of, which is a 5v5. And so I like that, but I'm also not like super driven to like if I care if I win or not. So I think 39 is maybe good. And then I got a 77 on community, which um, I think honestly could have been a little bit higher for me because I really like I mean, obviously we're doing the podcast. I love discussing games with people and I like collaborating on co-op stuff, but maybe I just don't play enough of those games.
Yeah.
So
What
yeah,
was your
it's kind
overall
of neat.
social component percentage?
It was 59% overall social.
Okay. Mine was I was 39% social, and mine was
Mhm.
competition 19% and community 68%.
Okay.
So similar ratio to you. Well, actually, not really. You were higher in competition than me. To be honest, like my competition, that's higher than I thought because the only game I would really say that I play with any regularly that is like quote unquote competitive is Apex, and the rest would be like
Mhm.
more the community based multiplayer. Like we were here, we were just talking about, or Remnant, we were just playing as like 3-player PVE. So I don't really know what else I play that's like competition. I mean, I jump into Fortnite here and there, I guess, but But
Yeah.
interesting.
I think maybe it also kind of, like, encapsulates, like, if you wanna get, like, a high score on
Mm-hmm,
something.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, those, like, single player avenues, but
True, true.
yeah. So this next one is by far my highest
I'm interested
percentage.
to see our differences
Um,
here.
yeah, this is the mastery component, which of mine is a total of 89%
Oh my god.
goes to this. Yeah, I scored very high. So the first component of this is challenge. So you enjoy playing games that rely heavily on skill and ability, practice and hone your gameplay, difficult missions or bosses. You don't mind dying and having to replay things because you know you'll master
Mm-hmm,
it.
mm-hmm.
You want a game that constantly challenges you. So I got 90% on that.
Jesus.
And then the other component, which also really appeals to me, is a strategy. So this is careful decision making, planning, weighing your outcomes, balancing resources, completing goals, tactful combat. So I got 77 on that as well. And I think that fits me to a T because the two favorite things I like are the fast paced action from soft kind of things, but also I love
Yeah.
good like a good strategy game.
This
So
really was like your section
mhm,
encapsulated, isn't it? And
absolutely.
just to clarify this before we get any further, because I just don't want to confuse anyone, including myself, would be that the mastery components together are like, so mine, I'm 18% the mastery components overall. So 18% of my, I guess what draws me towards games in general would be mastery. And then within like challenge and strategy, the percentages for those two would be how much more interested you are in this compared to the average person answering this quiz, I think is
Well,
what it is, right?
I think it's like
What
no,
percent,
I
like
think it's
what
like just
percentile you're in?
how like out of 100 like percent how much do you like care about these things? So I don't think it's necessarily like in comparison, it's just like your own personal like scale of this. So like
Yeah.
and then
But
that mastery component overall just takes the average. So like
are you
between
sure though?
77 and 90.
Because they don't add to
Yeah.
100% though.
They
Like,
don't add to 100%, but if you add up all the components, it also doesn't add to 100% because 'cause I've got 89 here, and then the next one I've
yeah,
got
maybe you're right.
48. So, like, I don't know
Interesting.
exactly. I mean, they're Quantum Foundry, they're doing the math, we're
Okay.
not.
Thank you, Quantic Foundry.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
don't know
so
how it works,
my
but the
mastery
numbers are
components,
fun.
18% overall. The numbers are fun. I agree. I like this stuff. My challenge is 3%.
Wow, okay.
I thought that was a little bit low. Come on, I beat Bloodborne. Okay, like
Yeah.
come on, it's a little bit low. I was anticipating it to be like maybe 25% because it's not that I don't want a challenge. It's not what draws me towards games, you know.
Mhm.
And then the strategy was 65% for me, so I'm big on the strategy stuff as well. Probably
Mhm.
not quite as big as you like, I guess, judging by that. But I mean, I really enjoy Fire Emblem and you know tactics games and all those kind of things like Project Triangle strategy. Hell yeah, I can't wait. And I
Yeah,
also think like strategy
absolutely.
comes into it's like multifaceted, right? Because a lot of RPGs they're not like strategy games, but you need to use strategy to get through the combat scenarios a lot of the time too. So interesting to look at for sure.
Mhm, and there yeah, like you said, there's tons of avenues. The next one is the achievement component. So this one is kind of interesting as well. It's split up into completion, which to me is 70%, which
Mm,
I thought was kind of high, but then when I was reading it and thinking about it a little bit more, it's very true. It's the desire to finish everything. So when I think of like finding all the collectibles, I was like, that's not me, but completing every mission, discovering every hidden location,
hmm.
talking to everyone, that boosts it so much for me because I hate feeling like I'm missing out on something.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
big. And then the other one, which is a bit lower for me and brings it down, is the power, which I only got 21%. It's kind of like striving to become powerful and like growing your character and finding like cosmetic items
Yeah.
and strategic optimizing. So like that to me was like I don't really like, and I think that's why partially why maybe I got a low destruction score earlier too, is like I don't get into the power fantasy very much
Hmm.
of
Yeah, neither
games.
do I. Neither do I. What was your overall achievement component?
48.
Okay, yeah. So I'm
48.
at 13% for achievement components, which is guess like yeah collectibles and all that. So my completion is only 14%, and
Hmm.
I saw that and I was like, man, that's really low. Like I would have thought that I would be
Yeah,
higher
I
than
thought
that,
you would be a bit
but
higher
you
because
know
you've platinumed a few things and whatnot.
yeah, but thinking about it, like getting platinums and whatnot and collecting things is very much an abnormality for me compared to like the
Mhm.
time I actually do it. And even playing games, like I like to be thorough, but I'm not like I'm not the kind of person that doesn't move to the next section until I complete all the side quests in something. And
Right.
I'm not the
That's
kind of
true.
person that, like, as much as I like to pick up like lore collectibles, I don't go into my menu and read all the flavor text on in nearly
Right.
any game, because it's just so, like, I'm the kind of person that likes to experience as many games as I can. So instead of like
Right.
diving really deep into one thing, I like to finish it, and unless it's like in the top percentile of things that really interest me, I'll just move along to the next thing to get the next
Right.
experience.
Oh, I am
You know?
so incredibly jealous of that. I have so much anxiety in a game of, like, missing things that I
Yeah.
have to do everything and then it's awful.
I
And then I
used to
end
be
up
like
not
that.
finishing something.
I used to be like that, but then there's so many times when it's like, oh, I'm really enjoying this game and I really want to go forward, but there's still three more side quests that I don't really
Yeah.
have any interest. So it kind of just puts you off. And I was like, I
Yeah.
reached a point where I was just like, fuck it. Like, I'm either gonna try and collect everything in this game and burn myself out and not finish it, or I can just kind of give up on these collectibles, enjoy the game
Yes.
for what it is, and actually get through
And
it.
and
And
that's
yeah.
100% a better philosophy to have, and I'm moving towards that direction. I'm trying to be better, but, it's hard.
It took me a long time to get there, that's for sure. But yeah, and then in power, I'm actually the same as you, 21%, which
Oh,
is
interesting.
yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever like grinded a character to max stats in an RPG
Mm-mm.
or anything. So I'm even surprised maybe 21% is a bit high in terms of that for me. But at the same time, like, it's not like I don't want to be powerful and have all these cool weapons and
Yeah.
all this
Oh,
stuff.
that's
So
that's
maybe that's it.
interesting. If we ever got into a fight, we would be equally powerful.
It's true. It's true.
We
Like,
could
I
not
know.
defeat one another.
Yeah, I know. A good friend of the show, Jazz. He is a total power person when it comes to RPGs. Like, he's the kind of person that would sit down, and he's played like Disgaea, which is another one of those kind of
Mhm.
tactics, Fire Emblem s games, and he like goes through and grinds his characters to max level just for the sake of it, and like really gets the enjoyment out of that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I can see like someone being like that and totally getting the power
Mhm.
fantasy. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think we're on to our second last. Yeah, the second last component is the creativity component, which is also pretty high for me, 79. I got in. The first category is discovery, which is 83% for me. So this goes back to even just that last category to kind of look at it from a different angle. They're constantly asking, what if game worlds are fascinating for them to experience and tinker with? You'll check every edge of the map, try to experiment with how approaching something might work in different ways. So I think that's true of me. And then design, I got 66. So they want to express their individuality in a game. They put a lot of time and effort into character creation and customizing how their character looks and plays. So I think that's kind of fair. Like I like. I'm not a huge. What's funny is I often end up liking games where you play as a certain character instead of making a character
I'm the
because
same way. Yeah.
I get a little bit more story out of that.
It's like the
Um,
bespoke story of that character versus like, hey, you're a
yeah,
random person that's been dropped into this
exactly,
world.
like, I think I like a little bit more of, like, what would John do versus, like, what would I do? Because I'm interested in John and seeing, like,
Hmm.
kind of role playing him
Well,
versus role playing, like, my own character, but
I
I
totally,
think
right?
I still do when it's time to come to that character customizer screen, I still spend an hour in it every time, so I guess this
Yeah,
is at least pretty accurate.
yeah. So mine for creativity, I'm overall 21%, and both
Mhm.
discovery and design are 25% for me, which is
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
Super even.
I'm pretty. I think those are pretty accurate, to be honest. Like, it's funny because I was just talking about how I don't really go for collectibles and trying to read all the little lore sections and everything that's like collected, but I still do the thing where I try to uncover all the map. you know, like I'll
Mhm.
still, when I'm playing The Last of Us or something, I'm still going into the corners to try and look for the collectibles and
Yep,
everything. The difference is
absolutely.
just that I don't freak out if I happen to miss one, and when I do collect them, I very rarely open the menu and go read what it says.
Right.
But I definitely try to still collect them when I can. And then the
Mhm.
design one, I guess, is seems about right for me. Honestly, like character creators and all that, like I do try and make them, but I don't go and like look up guides how to make whichever celebrity and all that, and the character creator like spend too much time. But I guess it makes sense.
Okay, and then the final category is and this one is the only one I thought was maybe a bit not super accurate for me, just in the sense that I thought it was a little low. It's
Mm,
the immersion component, which for me was only 54%, and I thought I'd be higher. So it's broken into fantasy, which is 49, and I see where I'm kind of split on this because it says there's part of it is being in a believable, world that you're exploring, which I thought for me would be extremely high. But there's
Hmm.
also a component of it allowing them to believe to become someone else. And there was that. I think a lot of questions too kind of emphasize the idea of like escapism,
Yeah.
and I think that's where I got that lower. It's like I don't really see myself as these characters or use it as escapism, but I do want to be immersed in the world. So I think that kind of like subtle difference between the 2 brought it down a bit.
Yeah.
And then the other one is story, which I got 58%, which I'm still surprised is low. This is, elaborate campaign with multi-dimensional characters, with backstories and lore, and you want to read everything and find all the dialogue and descriptions. Uh, and I was surprised I got 58 because I'm the kind of person like when I played Mass Effect for the first time, the only reason I played it was because I love the codex so much and reading everything. Like, I didn't care about the gameplay at all, but I
Oh
wanted
my
to read
god.
everything and, like, talk to all my followers and, like, I will I will 100% of the time never skip over lore details. Like, I love story and world and immersion. So I was surprised this was a little bit lower. I think what brought it down for me is the way I interpreted some of the questions about
Yeah.
being like escapism, which to me it's not, it's experiencing. And I think that's a little bit different. So I think, with any of these quizzes, it really depends on kind of how you interpret the questions. And then also like how maybe like reserved you are in answering. So like some people like on a scale of like how much do you care about this? Like, somewhat care, really care, like
Hmm.
care
Yeah, it's
so much. Like,
subjective.
like it's subjective and like some people are just more likely to be a little bit more exaggerate in their answers, or some people are more reserved, even if it's like their favorite thing, they'll put like, oh, pretty care because like you just don't really like ever go to the final option. So I
Hmm.
think it's kind of
Hmm.
hard to always like perfectly answer. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
I'm
totally
surprised
with
on
you.
this
Like,
one.
well, I agree completely. Let me just go over my answers quick first, and then
Mhm.
I'll get into it. So mine is immersion's 55% overall, with 64% on fantasy and 45% on story. Which I thought, looking at what the descriptions of these things are, I think it should be reversed for me because I'm more. It's I would say the main reason that I play games, if I had to pick one for myself, would be the story because to me, like that's the version of escapism that I like seeing what the story is that happens to Joel in The Last of Us, not like
Mhm.
playing my own story like we were just saying, but yet I scored higher in that kind of like placing yourself in the world. So I don't know if I
Mhm.
really fully agree with that, but I mean, Mass Effect is actually referenced as an example of both of these, so I guess it has
Yeah.
aspects of both. But yeah, I don't know, like this whole quiz in general. First of all, I feel like I got overall like a lot of my percentages are lower than yours, so I'm really interested about like how did my answers not really put me super high and very much in general,
Me and maybe I think maybe you're a reserved quiz taker. Maybe you
Possibly.
don't go to the, like, furthest end of all the answers very often.
Yeah, it could be because I got high scores. I guess my excitement is 76%, and I guess that does make sense.
Mhm.
Well, in like the community and whatnot, but I definitely think that if I were to, if someone was to give me these statistics and like these different motivational factors and get me to rank them or something, I think that my rankings would probably come out quite a bit different than what this quiz has given me. But like you said, it's about like the questioning and maybe I was more reserved in answers
Mhm.
or what. And they also ask you like throughout the quiz to give an example of a game that you recently enjoyed that has certain aspects. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I don't know if those games we put down kind of influence our answers at all. Or
I think they do, and then I think it also gives them data for, like, okay, you're really, like, creative person and you like this game, so, like, maybe, like, that's something a creative person might gravitate towards. I think, like, it's partially for your answers and then partially, like, for them to, like, take more data in from
yeah, yeah,
people doing the quiz. But anyway, I just thought it was, like, an interesting thing,
it
and, like,
is very cool.
I encourage you to, like, share it around your group. Like, it was really interesting, like, my go-to group outside of our podcast, there's a few of us that play, and we kind of have like similar game styles, and we all got relatively similar profiles. But one of the guys in our group, he is the kind of person that plays like one or two games but gets really into them.
Hmm.
So like
Hmm.
he like raids on a schedule for WoW and like plays a couple other like he plays like HOTS with us and a couple other games, and then he's got a couple strategy games he plays, and he's like, but he gets really into them, but like such a small breadth
Yeah,
of
yeah.
choices, but, like, to really intense, and his profile was so different than the rest of ours, it was really interesting just to see, like, how drastic it changed, but it's so true, he's got such a different, like, library
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
style of gaming, so I thought, like, at least, like, kind of tailored it pretty well, but, I just thought it was
It
fun,
is.
and,
It is very cool.
um, as a kind of, like, little wrap up to ours, my motivation profile is fast-paced, proficient, completion, and creative, which sounds very, very nice, I'll take
Wait,
it.
where did you see this?
It's at the top, like, under where it gives you your types, it's, like, just a
Okay, okay.
couple
Oh,
little, like, keywords.
keywords.
It's above, like, the chart before it goes over
Oh,
the
above the
groups
chart.
in
Okay, yeah, yeah.
detail. Mhm.
So above the chart. Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, mine is fast-paced, analytical, relaxed, gregarious, and practical.
Oh,
Interesting.
interesting. Wow, such nice qualities that
It
we
is.
possess.
Oh, how lovely. Well, if you take the quiz and you'd like to share your answers with us and maybe chat about that, you can send us an email to circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com. Or you can also check us out on Twitter at CNSPod. Of course, all these links are in the description and the show notes or wherever you're watching and listening. So give us a look on there. Of course, before we leave the show forever, though, well, not forever, until next
Forever.
episode.
Goodbye, you'll never hear us again.
uh, yeah, until forever, we actually have to answer our listener mail question before we get out of here, Kate. So the question
Mhm.
today from Matthias is, if you're sucked into a video game forever, what game would you like to be sucked into and why?
This is kind of something that comes up every now and again, and it's such an interesting thing to think about, and the problem I have when I try to answer this is that all of my favorite games would be awful to live in
I agree
because
completely.
I am scared of monsters, and I'm not a fighter, and I would just die if I got put into any of
Yeah,
these
any of these
worlds.
settings. So you don't want to go
At
anywhere
best
medieval?
yes,
Just gonna be like
exactly. At
a
best,
plague?
at best I'd be stuck in a hub town where, like, I maybe, like, was a merchant and just spent all day selling shit to adventurers,
Yeah, I sell
or
potions and necklaces. And
yeah, exactly. That's not very exciting, and I never leave my town because if you step 3 feet out of it, a pack of wolves attacks you, so not into that. So what I always come back to, and I always feel like it's such, like, a generic answer, but genuinely, it would just be so nice to live in one of the Pokemon games. It's
right?
like there's wild there's creatures and there's always danger, but they never attack you. They fight your Pokemon. Like the trainers are never in danger, and like there's such beautiful environments. There's like such wonderful nature, but also like cities, and everyone is so pleasant, and they just want to talk about Pokemon with you, and it's just so wholesome. And having Pokemon is like the ultimate fantasy. Like they're just pets, but cooler. And you go
I'm
on an
totally with you.
adventure, like
Hmm.
it just
Hmm.
you can't hate it.
It's true. I was thinking Pokemon, of course. Like that's such a good answer for something like this, right?
Mhm.
I was thinking that. I thought Stardew Valley would be cool. Just live your nice simple life on the
See, I
farm.
thought about games like that too, like that farm and like Animal Crossing and stuff, but it's like, it's a lot of manual labor and like
It is.
I'm kind of a little lazy.
I also thought like
I
with
want my
Animal
Pokemon
Crossing,
to do it for me.
with Animal Crossing too, it's almost like living in that world would almost become like frustratingly like, well, like why is no one ever upset here? Why is everything just so happy go lucky? Like it would almost
Yeah,
become too happy that it's irritating to you.
right? And like everyone else is like, "Oh, I see Chip never put in any money for this bridge we're making. It always seems to be me funding all of these
Yeah,
things." Like
right.
everyone else is useless.
It's true. So I kind of tried to go a different way and just think of where would I want to retire in a game, because
Okay.
living in these worlds, there's I want to just kind of think of some kind of different answers. So I settled actually with a game, Final Fantasy 15, that I played a couple years ago. In the
Mhm.
world of Eos, it's a cool world. It's kind of one of those old school kind of fantasy worlds meets a modern society, because they still have cars and like you know modern houses and stuff like that, so it would be more comfortable to live there. But also there's this place which I really really loved when I was there. It's called Golden Quay, and it's basically this beautiful tropical beach with some of the best water I've ever seen in a video game, and it's just this resort you can stay at. There's like a campsite and some nice restaurants and like a high quality hotel, and just this lovely place. Everyone seems to be having a nice drink and having a dinner and stuff. So I'd just like to go retire at Golden Quay in Final Fantasy 15 and hang out there. Super
That's
nice.
beautiful. I
Super,
like the
super
idea of
nice.
like where would I retire to? Like
Yeah.
that kind of frames it differently in like, the smaller scale, more relaxing things. Like, yeah, I maybe wouldn't want to live my life in this like small isolated place, but like, yeah, to retire to,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So maybe I'll go live in the Kanto region of Pokemon, hang out there for the next 30 years or so,
Yeah.
and then just retire
Well,
early at Golden Quay and
the other
call it a
thing I
day.
like about it too, thinking about Pokemon, is I like kind of the like almost like thinking of it more like the Detective Pikachu movie where like they're
Hmm.
integrated
Hmm.
into like the everyday world. So like the Machamps are like they're movers, and like like you like someone is like has a cafe, and like they're kind of like
Yeah.
integrated into like just different like roles, as well as like just being like Pokemon fights. So, like you could just live in like a city and just have like a Pokemon companion, and you like you know
He's a
is like a
detective and he's a
yeah,
Pikachu.
he's a detective, but he's a Pikachu. Like, whoa, imagine, like, going to work day and, like, the guy sitting at the next desk over is, like, a Chansey.
Yeah.
Like, "Hey, Chansey," like, "Morning."
Well, yeah,
It's
like I said
great.
before, if you want to get in touch, send us where you'd also like to live in your game world. So, let us know. But thank you for joining us as always on the show, and we'll see you again on 2 weeks' time on episode 27. The intro and outro music for Circles and Squares was produced by friend of the show Matthew Chan. Interlude music is from Scott Gratton of the Free Music Archive. Our channel art was created by @unreasonable on Twitter, and our brother Alex is the designer of the Circles and Squares logo. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show.